they've spent the last couple nights in Hope hanging out in the school gym, which has been amazing, and the people at the Hope have been wonderful. And so I'm actually going to get, some of them are taking boats now from down the river, which is, there's helicopters that are taking some people, which at a huge expense, personal expense. So if you can afford a helicopter, that's happening, but they're booked, I think, till Friday now. And so, yeah, that's where I'm going. Hopefully they're going to make it on the boat.
What have you heard from them? I mean, for kids it's an adventure, but it's also something else, right?
Yeah, and it's a beautiful day. That's really helping these kind of rescue. It doesn't feel like a government rescue mission, though. It feels like people had to take it into their own hands. They've had so little communication. And so it really is, this new reality of, wow, we have to, as a community, figure out how we're going to help all the people that are still there and won't be able to do this.
You know what? We've heard this from a number of people, that people feel as though they have to take things into their own hands.
Yeah.
What does that say to you?
I think we're, it's really interesting right now with the pandemic. I'm wondering, I teach at Simon Fraser at the Center for Dialogue, and I think, we're all in work, teaching, and where are the government workers still not back at work? That's part of my question is, if we were all at work, maybe there'd be a faster response. And so it's curious that the teachers are all back and, all the healthcare workers, but it's just sort of a disconnect for me.
When you take a look at living there and seeing something like this unfold, I mean, we've been talking more broadly just about what it's like to live, in some ways, at the pointy edge of the wedge when it comes to climate change. How does that feel, and does it change how you think about where you live?
I feel like I've been involved in this work for a long time around sustainability and climate change and education and thinking about place-based education and the importance of that. And it really hit home, I think, yesterday, understanding that Abbotsford used to be, what flooding now used to be a lake, and starting to really think about how we think about where we are, what needs to happen in the future, how we're educating our children to be prepared for this. My kids that, he's missed a bunch of days in school, and they're worried about his math test. And I'm thinking, well, there's some bigger issues here that we should be focusing on, and I'm not sure we're really focusing as a community on, how are we going to be resilient? What's the focus? So I really changed my thinking around my kids and their future and education, to be honest.
What's the conversation that you think we should be having right now about this?
I think it's, I think there's a conversation about place-based, understanding where we are and what the natural ecosystems are going through. And I think if everybody really understood that, then there would be no question about what we should be doing in terms of, the focus. We had a vote in Vancouver for a climate emergency that would have added $40 to our bill, and it was shot, it didn't get through. And I think it has to be taken up another level to the federal government, to the provincial government, to just say, this is what we're doing now. So leadership, I think, is really people are going to have to step in and say, this is where we're heading, and there's, that's what I think.
You wonder just whether this is a turning point, whether this will change that conversation. If that vote were to be held tomorrow, whether the levy would pass rather than fail.
Yeah, I just feel like that it goes away, like their last caller said. People, I'm still in the emergency because I'm still trying to get my family home. There's a lot of people still trying to, in the middle of this emergency, and yet the news cycle will switch to the next thing as if it's over. And I really encourage us to, keep following this on maybe it's a daily basis, that this is the new reality that we're all going to be working towards, and making sure all those people in Merritt and Hope and all the places that are really struggling. Yeah, and like the fires this summer, right?
Yeah. I'll let you get back on the road. How much more do you have?
I should be there in about an hour. Hope that to meet the boat.
and your
Okay.
kids will have stories to tell.
Oh, they will, yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, Janet. Janet Moore driving from Vancouver to Mission to pick up her son's hockey team. They have been stranded and are now trying to make their way back home. You're listening to a CBC Radio Network special. My name's Matt Galloway, taking a look at the flooding in British Columbia. We're on the air for another hour or so, and curious to hear how this is affecting you. We've heard from a lot of people in British Columbia. Elsewhere in the country, be interested. Are you watching this? Are you alarmed by what you're seeing when a town like Abbotsford, which is just an hour outside of Vancouver, the highway that runs through it is underwater? If you saw the National last night, Ian Hannamansing in a helicopter flying over communities in the Fraser Valley, which normally would be farmers' fields, and now just rivers. The images that you perhaps seen, we talked about this yesterday on The Current on CBC Radio, of farmers trying to move their cattle to higher ground because the water kept going up and up and up. 3 meters of water outside of Abbotsford, and the fingers are crossed that the pumping station continues to work, because there are concerns that perhaps if that were not to happen, all that water could come flooding in. If you're watching from outside, outside of BC, we'd love to hear from you as well. 1-888-416-8333. There are a lot of people who have been stranded because of the flooding. Again, a number of major roads, including the Coquihalla Pass and the highway that runs through the interior, just washed right out, parts of it, other roads as well. And that's left a lot of people stuck on those roads or stuck in communities where they're trying to find refuge. Manjeet Johal has been stranded in Hope since yesterday. Manjeet, hello.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Well, we're doing in a
Podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
The National Research Council official time signal. The beginning of the long dash indicates exactly 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. This is CBC News. Good afternoon. It is 1 o'clock and 7 degrees with light rain in Ottawa. I'm Lawrence Wall. Nearly 20,000 people have been forced from their homes across British Columbia in their once-in-a-century storm. One person is dead, 2 others are missing. Officials say they believe they'll see more fatalities in the coming days. 11 more rescues were carried out overnight in the city of Abbotsford. Hundreds of Canadian Forces personnel are now on the ground. But as the floodwaters recede, harder questions are being asked about the cost to pay for the recovery. Lindsay Duncombe reports.
The mayor of Abbotsford, Henry Braun, had a 15-minute call with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
He has assured me, as has the Premier and multiple provincial ministers, that they are 100% behind us. They will provide whatever we need.
What he expects the community will need is cash, and a lot of
I
it.
take them all at their word, but I've also prepared them for one big bill at the end of this, because this is not going to be just 10 million or 50 million. This is in the multiple hundreds, if not maybe higher than that.
Bridges need to be tested and secured, dikes need to be rebuilt, not to mention support for businesses, especially agricultural operations devastated by the flooding. Some of that work will need to be done quickly, as there are forecasts of significant rain early next week. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Vancouver.
CBC News has learned that Health Canada will announce tomorrow that it's approved the Pfizer vaccine for children under the age of 12. This will be the first COVID vaccine in Canada available to the 5 to 11 age group. The federal government has secured just under 3 million doses of the pediatric vaccine. That's enough for every child in Canada to get a first dose. Ontario's Minister of Transportation says she hopes to have the scope of a public inquiry into Ottawa's light rail system finalized by the new year. Caroline Mulrooney spoke with reporters this morning after her government announced that it will hold the inquiry into the troubled system. The LRT is only back online this week after being shut down for nearly 2 months. Mulrooney says her government is not the only party concerned about what's happening with the LRT.
There are a lot of people who are raising concerns about what's been going on with the Ottawa LRT. A lot of players are involved. That's why the province has decided to take this step. Cabinet discussed this yesterday, so it's a big step. It's new, but we're going to be looking at the involvement of lots of players. The key is to get answers for the Ontario taxpayer.
Mayor Jim Watson says he was blindsided by yesterday's call for the inquiry, but Mulroney says her office has been in constant contact with the mayor about LRT developments. The Prime Minister is in Washington for talks with the presidents of the U.S. and Mexico. But just before today's Leaders Summit, members of Justin Trudeau's government have been openly voicing their concerns about a looming trade issue. Here's the Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland.
This electric vehicle incentive in the United States was not designed with Canada in mind.
Freeland is sounding the alarm about a Biden administration proposal that would give tax credits to Americans who buy made-in-the-U.S. electric vehicles. Freeland says this will hurt electric vehicle production in Canada and could violate the new North American Free Trade Agreement. Justin Trudeau says this issue and other trade concerns are high on his summit agenda. A fire broke out earlier today on board one of the Canadian ships taking part in a NATO exercise off the coast of Norway. No injuries are being reported, but HMCS Fredericton is now on its way to a Norwegian port for repairs. The outgoing German Chancellor Angela Merkel says the country is experiencing a dramatic surge in new cases of COVID-19.
Gegenwärtige Pandemielage in Deutschland ist dramatisch. Ich kann es nicht anders sagen.
More than 65,000 infections have been reported over the past 24 hours. That is a record for Germany. Stepped-up public health restrictions are on the way. One government official calls it a lockdown for the unvaccinated. Germany has one of the lowest vaccination rates in Western Europe, with just over 67% of the population fully vaccinated. For news updated through the day and night, stay tuned to CBC Radio 1 and go to our website, cbc.ca/Ottawa. And that was the CBC News. The weather for Ottawa and the region, a few showers ending, then cloudy with chance of more showers, temperature falling to 6. Right now in Ottawa, light rain 7, Kingston 8, Pembroke 12, Cornwall 4, Maniwaki 3. This is Radio 1.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6.
C equals mc squared. The human genome is our shared inheritance. Cracks and cracks.
Hi, I'm Bob McDonald. On this week's show, new research confirms that a simple
For that.
Iris is a tightrope walker, the central character of the fantasy novel The Bones of Ruin. Iris is trying to work out her identity, a balancing act that mirrors that of her creator, Sarah Raleigh.
I think I was taking a lot from my own experience as an African girl in the diaspora.
Sarah Raleigh and The Bones of Ruin on the next chapter with Sheila Rogers. Tomorrow afternoon at 3:30 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
The National Research Council official time signal. The beginning of the long dash indicates exactly 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. This is CBC News. Good afternoon. It's 1 o'clock and 3 degrees with light snow in Ottawa. I'm Lawrence Wall. The U.S. House of Representatives has just passed a bill that includes a subsidy for Americans buying U.S.-made electric vehicles. Canada worries the subsidy will devastate sales of Canadian-made electric cars and trucks. The Prime Minister has been lobbying this week in Washington to try to persuade President Joe Biden not to go ahead with it. More from the CBC's Chris Glover.
Joe Biden scored a big victory today. His Build Back Better bill passed the U.S. House of Representatives. Biden has been trying to get this nearly $2 trillion spending package through the U.S. Congress for months. And as it passed the House, there was thunderous applause from Democrats, but it still has to pass the Senate, and there it'll need every Democrat to support it. Now, at present, present. We know at least one Democratic Senator, Joe Manchin, still has issues with it. One of Manchin's concerns is that electric vehicle credit. And although the concerns are different, that's the same credit that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has concerns with as well. Trudeau says the credit's Buy America provision would be devastating for Canada's auto sector. So at yesterday's bilateral meeting with Joe Biden at the White House, Trudeau tried and failed to get changes to the credit, but Trudeau is vowing to keep fighting and Biden is vowing to keep listening. And since it still needs Senate approval, Trudeau still has time. Chris Glover, CBC News, Washington.
Here at home, an Ottawa man is among 3 people charged with kidnapping and robbery. Police say the victim thought he was meeting a woman he had encountered on social media. The man forced the victim to drive to several locations in Toronto where he was made to withdraw cash or make purchases for them before he was released. Rcmp want to resume its sale of surplus vehicles. The Mounties ended the program in January after the mass killings in Nova Scotia by a gunman using a surplus Rcmp vehicle. However, as Catherine Tunney tells us, the program brings the police force $8 million a year.
They say they're running out of room, they're running out of storage space, and that's impacting operations. So previously, the RCMP, like other government departments, had been able to sell its surplus through the government's auction site. In January, that was put on hold in response to that horrible mass shooting in Nova Scotia, where the gunman impersonated a police officer and was using a former RCMP vehicle. Well, now Commissioner Brenda Lucki is asking the government to slowly restart the resale program, starting with what she calls low-risk vehicles. And we know this because we obtained a briefing note through the Access to Information System where she lays out to the federal government it's hurting their operations, both the RCMP detachments that have to hold onto these cars, and they also use third-party vendors as well, who are also seeing kind of a pile-up, if you will, a backlog. They're really impacting the flow in of new cars and out of old cars.
And that was Catherine Tunney in Ottawa. Ottawa Public Health is reporting new outbreaks in a rooming house and an elementary school. 9 students are now infected in the outbreak at Holy Family Elementary School. Outbreaks at the civic campus of the Ottawa Hospital and a city shelter have stabilized but do remain active. In all, the city is dealing with 26 outbreaks of the virus. CUPE is expected to announce voting results later today on a tentative deal with the New Brunswick government. That deal ended a 16-day strike. It shut down schools and affected healthcare, transportation, and infrastructure services. Neither side has released details of the agreement. And Austria is expanding its COVID-19 lockdown. At first, it only applied to unvaccinated people, but now the lockdown will apply to everyone.
Ab Montag für maximal 20 Tage wird ein bundesweiter Lockdown gelten.
Chancellor Alexander Schallenberg says the new rules will start on Monday and last for at least 20 days. All Austrians will be barred from leaving their homes except for essential reasons, including work and school. He also announced that the country will become the first in Europe to make vaccinations mandatory starting next February. For news updated through the day and night, stay tuned to CBC Radio 1 and go to our website, cbc.ca/Ottawa. And that was the CBC News. The weather for Ottawa and the region, mainly cloudy today, chance of flurries this afternoon, wind west 20, gusting to 40, the high of 2. Right now in Ottawa, mostly cloudy 3. Kingston 3, Pembroke 4, Cornwall 1, Maniwaki 2. This is CBC Radio 1.
Hi, I'm Elamine Abdul Mahmoud, and welcome to Pop Chat. This is the show where we gather to dig deep.
KK, Tanara McLean, and me. Althea Manasan is our digital producer. Our senior producer is Jennifer Warren. I'm AC Rowe. Thanks for listening.
The National Research Council official time signal. The beginning of the long dash indicates exactly 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time.
From CBC News, The World This Hour, I'm Kaz Boivin. The head of the International Olympic Committee says he's had a video call with Chinese tennis star Peng Shuai. Thomas Bach says she's safe and well and wants her privacy. Peng vanished from the public eye after she made sexual assault allegations against a senior Chinese political figure. Hillary Johnstone has the latest.
Peng Shuai reportedly told the IOC president in a video call that she is safe and well. She also asked that her privacy be respected. China has been under fire in recent days to account for the tennis star's whereabouts. She hadn't been publicly seen or heard from in weeks, ever since she made sexual assault allegations on social media against a former senior Chinese politician. Earlier today, Chinese state-affiliated media posted videos on Twitter showing Peng at a youth tennis tournament in Beijing and at a restaurant. The Women's Tennis Association said the videos were, quote, insufficient, and it wasn't convinced Peng was free and able to make decisions and take actions on her own. Peng's disappearance and reappearance come at a sensitive time for both China and the IOC. The Beijing Winter Olympics start in 75 days, and some are calling for a boycott. When asked whether Canada is considering a possible diplomatic boycott, Global Affairs said in a statement, quote, "We will continue to discuss this matter with our closest partners." Hillary Johnstone, CBC News, Ottawa.
In Sudan, pro-democracy protesters in Khartoum surged toward the presidential palace, marching against the military control over the government. At a separate rally in nearby Omdurman, a teenager was shot dead today by security services. It all comes as a deal was signed by Sudan's military leaders to reinstate a man they ousted from power. Joan Leishman has the details.
Recitations from the Koran ahead of a deal that caught Sudan and the world by surprise. After an October military coup that put Prime Minister Abdul Hamid under house arrest, today he was reinstated.
Signing this framework agreement opens the door for fixing the challenges of the transition.
Until the coup, Hamdok was the leader of a joint civilian-military transitional government. It was formed after Sudan's longtime dictator Omar al-Bashir was ousted. The deal has already been rejected by the Forces of Freedom and Change, Sudan's coalition of civil society and political groups. It said it couldn't accept any compromise with the military, but it's unclear what role the military will now play. However, few believe it will be very far from the center of power. Joan Leishman, CBC News, Toronto.
The first doses of the Pfizer vaccine for kids are expected to arrive in Canada today. Health Canada approved the vaccine's use in children ages 5 to 11 on Friday. Once the shipment arrives, it'll be up to the provinces and territories to manage distribution. Several dozen more troops have arrived in Abbotsford, BC to help with the flooding crisis and to repair a breached dike. More members of the military are expected to arrive in the coming days. Crews on the ground are working to rebuild roads and supply chains across the province. BC's Minister of Agriculture, Fisheries and Food, Lana Popham, says grocery stores are being restocked.
We are seeing food moving through the Fraser Valley up into areas that are where food is needed. But if there are any needs that where food needs to be flown in, we're keeping track of that.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is convening a meeting of the Incident Response Group to discuss the crisis in BC and will provide an update in about 3 hours. Meantime, it's back to work for newly elected or re-elected MPs 2 months after the last federal election. Parliament resumes tomorrow morning. This time with a vaccine mandate in place. All MPs, their staff, and media will need to show proof of vaccination in order to enter buildings unless medically exempted. The first order of business will be electing the Speaker of the House of Commons, followed by the throne speech on Tuesday. That's your world this hour. For CBC News, I'm Kaz Flavin.
And here's your weather forecast for Ottawa. A mix of sun and cloud today with a high of 7. Cloudy overnight tonight with showers beginning early this evening. The wind gusting to 50 kilometers an hour, a low of 2. For tomorrow, rain and flurries ending in the morning, then a mix of sun and cloud with flurries heavy at times beginning in the afternoon. A high of 2. Overnight will be cloudy with a low of -9. For Tuesday, a mix of sun and cloud, a high of -1. Hi, I'm Nora Young. This is Spark. Today I repeated an episode from earlier this year.
My name is Mark Fennell, and I'm from Australia. Also, I'm from India and Singapore and Ireland. Actually, I'm from a lot of places. Places where Britain kind of stole stuff.
It's shameless. It's so blatant.
That's what I'm going to try and make sense of. How we ended up with our world told through a shield, a mask, a spear, just some stuff that the British stole. Available now on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts.
The National Research Council official time signal. The beginning of the long dash indicates exactly 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. This is CBC News. Good afternoon, it's 1 o'clock and 3 degrees in Ottawa. I'm Lawrence Wall. Rain is expected to fall all day in much of northern British Columbia. Later this week, the rain moves south, a move that could worsen already hard-hit flooded areas. More from the CBC's Renee Filipponi.
The rain has started in the north with heavy downpours expected for Prince Rupert and the surrounding areas. That weather system will move south through today and into the week, putting areas already struggling with floodwater right in its path, like the Sumas Prairie and Abbotsford. Now in that region, crews, including the Canadian military, are working to build up the protective dike. The mayor says it needs to be raised a further 3 meters and widened to be effective against any more water flowing in. For now, the good news is they have been able to open the floodgates, and some of that water that's been sitting in the field for days has been able to drain out into the Fraser River. But the mayor has extended the state of emergency for another week. There is some good news today for the residents of Merritt, where the entire town was evacuated. Some residents will now be able to return home in the next few days as tests continue on the drinking water, but they are now very close to getting the wastewater treatment plant back up online. Renee Filipponi, CBC News, Vancouver.
Ontario has announced that parents can book a vaccine appointment for their children aged 5 to 11 starting tomorrow morning. It says the first doses could be administered as early as this Thursday. Here's the Health Minister, Christine Elliott.
Unfortunately, we know right now that a third of the new cases of COVID are in school-aged children. So I think that speaks to the need to get children vaccinated as it's being as important as adults being vaccinated.
Health Canada announced on Friday that it had approved Pfizer's pediatric vaccine. Most provinces are signaling that they would like to see most children in that age group get their first needle by the end of this year. More than 300 workers with the Toronto District School Board have been put on administrative leave today without pay. These workers have not provided their COVID-19 status. But the TDSB is also granting temporary exemptions to keep hundreds of other staff members on the job. The board's Ryan Bird says they're needed to keep working for now to minimize the impact on students' learning, well-being, and safety.
We've made this decision to have temporary exemptions for staff that are playing critical roles when it comes to health, safety, well-being. So special needs assistants helping the students with special needs. You have lunchroom supervisors that are supporting schools and supervising kids during the lunch period. And so we've exempted 290 temporarily so that we can continue that service.
Bird says the exemptions will only be extended until the positions can be filled. Unvaccinated staff will continue to have 3 times a week rapid antigen tests. Police in Wisconsin will give an update this afternoon about Sunday's fatal Christmas parade tragedy. At least 5 people died and dozens more were hurt when a red SUV barreled into parade goers in Waukesha. Police have 1 person of interest in custody. More from Chris Wynn of CNN.
We are hearing now from several sources that person of interest that police do have in custody may have been fleeing another incident prior to going through the barricades that had been set up for the parade and then plowing into the crowd of people, many of them participants in the parade. We will be hearing from officials this afternoon at around 2 o'clock, and we hope to learn more and bring that information to you. This was supposed to be a joyful occasion for the entire community, but of course, many folks waking up this morning to a sense of sadness, disbelief, just absolute shock over what transpired.
And that was Chris Wynn of CNN. And finally, another powerful storm into the Atlantic region today. The heaviest rain and winds are expected tonight, overnight, and into tomorrow. Officials are warning people to be prepared for possible flooding and power outages. Rory Hollett is with the Halifax Regional Fire and Emergency.
Crews have been out looking at areas prone for flooding, and crews have been cleaning that out. We've had street sweepers out also in areas where there are lots of trees, cleaning out the needles.
The Marine Atlantic has cancelled several ferry sailings. For news updated through the day and night, stay tuned to CBC Radio 1 and go to our website, cbc.ca/Ottawa. That was the CBC News. The weather for Ottawa and the region, a mix of sun and cloud today, chance of flurries, windy, temperature falling to -1. Right now in Ottawa, partly cloudy and 3 degrees.
The next chapter.
With Sheila Rogers. You know, we all do things we're probably going to take to our grave. And
I'm Amanda Pfeffer. Coming up on Ontario Today, should regular breast cancer screening be expanded to younger women?
I hear over and over, my family physician told me I'm not allowed to screen you in your 40s.
Add pandemic delays. What's wrong with breast cancer screening in Ontario today?
This is CBC News. Good afternoon, it's 12 o'clock and 1 degree in Ottawa. I'm Lawrence Wall. The chair of the Ottawa Police Services Board says the new budget just approved is important for change both for the police force and the community. Councillor Diane Deans was speaking after approval of a 2% increase in that budget. That is $11 million in new money, but it's $3 million short of what the force had requested. The 7-member board passed the motion unanimously last night. The budget request comes after more than a year of repeated calls by community groups to defund or freeze the police budget. Here's Diane Deans.
I really believe if we make these important changes, we can restore public trust and confidence in our police service, and that the morale in the police service will rise accordingly. So I really think that this is an important budget. It signals change. It signals that we want to support the police and the work that they do, and we want to support the community.
The budget will go to full City Council on December 8th. Ontario officials are meeting today with their federal counterparts to try to hammer out a new deal on childcare. The province's education minister says his government is simply looking for a fair deal. Stephen Lecce says the money currently being offered by the federal government would not reduce fees to $10 a day.
We want to make sure that prices come down for all families. We want to see $10 a day delivered for moms and dads in Ontario. It is too expensive for too many families, and the Premier is committed to getting a fair deal, take the time, work with the feds, and land the best possible deal for the people of this province.
9 provinces and territories have already signed deals with the federal government on the $30 billion 5-year child care plan. OPP are warning motorists on Highway 401 near Cornwall to be prepared for traffic delays today. What's called a rolling blockade is proceeding on the 401 westbound from Cornwall to Napanee. It's a show of support for the hereditary chiefs of the Wet'suwet'en First Nation in British Columbia. The chiefs are trying to stop a pipeline from being built through their territory. A protest was also held recently in Kingston. Ottawa City Council has approved allowing yet another warehouse to be built. This one is at the corner of Walkley and Conroy Roads in the South End Business Park. The proposal passed in a close vote, 13 to 11. Councillor Diane Dean says dozens of residents have written to the city worried about trucks on Conroy. She says a premier business park is no place for a warehouse.
I firmly believe this is not the best place for warehousing in the South Ottawa Business Park, and most importantly, the community that I represent doesn't believe that either.
Councillor Glenn Gower co-chairs the planning committee which endorsed the warehouse proposal earlier this month. He says other light industrial uses would also have created traffic, and he says this project anticipates only an extra 5 to 8 trucks per hour.
This is not on the scale of a large Amazon-type logistics warehouse. We're talking about 3 separate warehouses with a total of 32 loading docks, and they're capped at 10,000 square meters each.
The city is reviewing zoning for warehouses. The new official plan puts them near the 400 series highways. Neither of those is yet in force. MPs are back in action today in the House of Commons. First up, a debate over bringing back a hybrid Commons and committee meetings. The first piece of legislation the government is putting forward will be about COVID-19 support. Here's the CBC's Janice McGregor from our Parliamentary Bureau.
When Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland announced changes to the government's pandemic supports a few weeks ago, she said the government would need legislative authority to be able to continue things like rent and wage subsidies through to next spring. And so her bill to do that was put on notice for introduction as early as this afternoon. Remember, these are scaled back programs. They're now targeted only at those businesses hit the hardest and hurting the longest, like the tourism and hospitality sector. Should lockdowns re-emerge this winter, there is a $300 a week income support benefit that would kick in for workers, but otherwise, the only part of the Canada Recovery benefit that's still offered is the sickness and caregiver benefits. This represents a significant withdrawal and winding down of the government's pandemic spending, and it comes at a time when Conservatives have been arguing that the government needs to do more about inflationary pressures in the economy, but the NDP believes that this is all happening too quickly, that people still need help.
That was the CBC's Janice McGregor. And finally, unions are challenging Canada Post on a vaccine mandate that could see thousands of employees going on unpaid leave next week. The mandate requires compliance by Friday and does not allow for regular rapid testing as an option. Brenda McCauley of the Canadian Postmasters and Assistants Association says it's been a polarizing issue, especially for members in rural communities.
They're very isolated, and then they're saying to us, we've served our customers for the last 18 months. It hasn't been a problem. We've been self-distancing. We've been wearing the mask. We've had the screens up. So why now?
The union wants proof from Canada Post that rapid testing as an alternative is not good enough. For news updated through the day and night, stay tuned to CBC Radio 1 and go to our website, cbc.ca/Ottawa. Was the CBC News. The weather for Ottawa and the region, mainly sunny today, the high of 4. Right now in Ottawa, partly cloudy and 1. Kingston 5, Pembroke 1, Cornwall, Maniwaki 0 degrees.
Good afternoon. Best recipe for a perfect Sunday night? First, gather all your ingredients. You'll need at least 1 cup of flour, several heaping tablespoons of butter, 10 amateur bakers from across Canada, a generous amount of laughs and excitement, and just a pinch of salt. The best tasting competition is back for another season. Don't miss a fresh new episode of The Great Canadian Baking Show, Sunday at 8:30 in Newfoundland on CBC and CBC Gen.
The National Research Council official time signal. The beginning of the long dash indicates exactly 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. This is CBC News. Good afternoon. It is 1 o'clock and 2 degrees in Ottawa. I'm Lawrence Wall. A major storm system is drenching southwestern Newfoundland. Overnight and this morning, some areas received more than 100 millimeters of rain, with more still to come. This is the same system that roared across northeastern Nova Scotia yesterday that left behind widespread flooding and washouts. The CBC's Brett Ruskin has the latest from Halifax.
Residents were just drifting off to sleep last night when an emergency alert went out across Cape Breton Island. Stay off the roads, it said, not just the Cabot Trail, which is the main highway, but all roads. The alert applies to Inverness and Victoria counties, and within that area, bridges buckled and on the verge of collapse. Highways underwater. Ingonish Beach saw between 230 and 270 millimeters of rainfall since this storm began. The road to the north and the road to the south from the community, both underwater. A few hundred residents that live there still have supplies, including a couple gas stations, but emergency officials who put out that widespread evening alert will likely target their efforts on regions where there's no way in or out. Brett Ruskin, CBC News, Halifax.
The mayor of Ottawa says he'll be speaking with the police chief about his budget because he does not want to see frontline services affected. Last night, the Police Services Board approved a 2% increase for that budget, less than what the police brass had proposed. For more than a year, community groups have repeatedly called for defunding or freezing the police budget. Mayor Jim Watson says police don't have a good track record at finding efficiencies, and any overspending would have to be covered by taxpayers. Watson says he does not support any move that could affect the number of police officers.
The public certainly are telling me, not the ones that go out and block roads or have rallies at City Hall. The public that I talk to, and I go out more and more to a lot more events, they want to see a greater police presence in their neighborhood, particularly for things like speed enforcement. It's the #1 complaint.
The police budget goes to full City Council on December 8th. Council can only approve it or reject it. Ottawa's medical officer of health says parents have booked 27,000 appointments so far to get their young children vaccinated. Dr. Vera Edges says most of those children will be vaccinated in the next 2 weeks. Pharmacies will start giving the vaccines this Friday. 3 community clinics will give the vaccine on Friday and 7 on Saturday. Some family doctors will also be offering the vaccines. The Premier of Quebec says more than 115,000 vaccine appointments have already been made for children ages 5 to 11. Today is the first day that children in that age bracket can get the shot against COVID-19. The CBC's Chloe Rinaldi spoke to some families this morning at one vaccination center.
11-year-old Karan says he got his first dose today, and he says he can't wait to tell his friends when he goes back to school.
Realizing that I'm gonna get vaccinated, I felt pretty, scared. I felt nervous. But I realized that it was just one, second. It was pretty simple.
His mom asked her brought him early this morning. She says he was the only one in the house who wasn't immunized.
And it was very important for us as a family to be vaccinated against COVID, so the moment it was announced, we were online and we got the appointment, and here we are, and it's done, so we're happy, very happy.
There were some changes at the Petite-École Vaccination Center to make things more kid-friendly. Instead of a large open space, cubicles were set up for each family for more privacy.
And that was the CBC's Chloe Rinaldi reporting. And finally, a jury has found the organizers of a 2017 far-right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, liable for more than $30 million in damages. They were found guilty of engaging in a conspiracy that led to injuries. Karen Dunn is the lawyer representing the plaintiffs.
This verdict today is a message that this country does not tolerate violence based on racial and religious hatred in any form.
In the civil case, the defendants included more than 20 Nazi sympathizers and white supremacists. For news updated through the day and night, stay tuned to CBC Radio 1 and go to our website, cbc.ca/Ottawa. And that was the CBC News. The weather for Ottawa and the region, mainly sunny today, the high of 4. A few clouds tonight, low of -2. Right now in Ottawa, partly cloudy and 2. Kingston 6, Pembroke 3, Cornwall 2, Maniwaki 1. Again in Ottawa, 2 degrees. This is Radio 1.